everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the fourth episode of Who Moved My Cheese reading series. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. We are going to continue where we left off on yesterday's episode. I would love for you guys to leave your thoughts and questions in the comment. So let us continue. Sometime later, after not finding cheese for what seemed a long time, Hall finally came across a huge cheese station which looked promising. When he went inside, however, he was most disappointed to discover that the cheese station was empty. This empty feeling has happened to me too often, he thought. He felt like giving up. Hall was losing his physical strength. He knew he was lost and was afraid that he would not survive. He thought about turning around and heading back to cheese station C. At least if he made it back and him was still there, Hall wouldn't be alone. Then he asked himself the same question again. What would I do if I weren't afraid? Hall thought he was past his fear, but he was afraid more often than he liked to admit, even to himself. He wasn't always sure what he was afraid of, but in his weakened condition, he knew now he was simply fearful of going on alone. Hall didn't know it, but he was running behind because he was still weighed down by fearful beliefs. Hall wondered if him had moved on or if he was still paralyzed by his own fears. Then Hall remembered the times when he had felt his best in the maze. It was when he was moving along. He wrote on the wall, knowing it was as much a reminder to himself as it was a marking for his friend him, hopefully to follow. It reads, "Movement in a new direction helps you find new cheese." Hall looked down the dark passageway and was aware of his fear. What lay ahead? Was it empty or worse? Were the dangers lurking? He began to imagine all kinds of frightening things that could happen to him. He was scaring himself to death. Then he laughed at himself. He realized his fears were making things worse, so he did what he would do if he wasn't afraid. He moved in a new direction. As he started running down the dark corridor, he began to smile. Hall didn't realize it yet, but he wasn't discovering what nourished his soul. He was letting go and trusting what lay ahead for him, even though he did not know exactly what it was. To his surprise, Hall started to enjoy himself more and more. Why do I feel so good? He wondered. I don't have any cheese, and I don't know where I'm going. Before long, he knew why he felt good. He stopped to write again on the wall. When you move beyond your fear, you feel free. Hall realized he had been held captive by his own fear. Moving in a new direction had freed him. Now he felt the cool breeze that was blowing in this part of the maze, and it was refreshing. He took in some deep breaths and felt invigorated by the movement. Once he had gotten past his fear, it turned out to be more enjoyable than he once believed it could be. Hall hadn't felt this way for a long time. He had almost forgotten how much fun it was to go for it. To make things even better, Hall started to paint a picture in his mind again. He saw himself in great realistic detail, sitting in the middle of a pile of his favorite cheese, from cheddar to brie. He saw himself eating the many cheeses he liked. He enjoyed what he saw. Then he imagined how much he would enjoy all their great tastes. The more clearly he saw the image of himself enjoying the new cheese, the more real and believable it became. He could sense that he was going to find it. He wrote, "Imagining myself enjoying new cheese, even before I find it, leads me to it." Hall kept thinking about what he could gain instead of what he was losing. He wondered why he had always thought a change would lead him to something worse. Now he realized that the change could lead him to something better. Why didn't I see this before? He asked himself. Then he raced through the maze with greater strength and agility. Before long, he spotted a cheese station and became excited as he noticed little pieces of new cheese near the entrance. They were types of cheeses he had never seen before, but they looked great. He tried them and found they were delicious. He ate most of the new cheese bits that were available and put few in his pocket to have later and perhaps share with him. He began to regain his strength. He entered the cheese station with great excitement, but to his dismay, he found it was empty. Someone had already been there and had left only a few bits of new cheese. He realized if it had moved sooner, he would be very likely to have find a good deal of new cheese here. Haw decided to go back and see if Him was ready to join him. As he retracted his steps, he stopped and wrote on the wall, "The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese." After a while, Haw made his way back to Cheese Station C and found Him. He offered him bits of new cheese, but was turned down. Him appreciated his friend's gesture, but said, "I don't think I would like new cheese. It's not what I'm used to. I want my own cheese back, and I'm not going to change until I get what I want." Haw just shook his head in disappointment and reluctantly went back out on his own. As he returned to the farthest point he had reached in the maze, he missed his friend, but realized he liked what he was discovering. Even before he found what he hoped would be a great supply of new cheese, if ever, he knew what made him happy wasn't just having cheese. He was happy when he wasn't being run by his fear. He liked what he was doing now. Knowing this, Haw didn't feel as weak as he did when he stayed in Cheese Station C with no cheese. Just realizing he was not letting his fear stop him and knowing that he had taken a new direction nourished him and gave him strength. Now he felt it was just a question of time before he found what he needed. In fact, he sensed he had already found what he was looking for. He smiled as he realized, "It is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation." Haw realized again, as he had once before, that what you are afraid of is never as bad as what you imagine. The fear you let build up in your mind is worse than the situation that actually exists. He'd been so afraid of never finding new cheese that he didn't even want to start looking. But since starting his journey, he had found enough cheese in the corridors to keep him going. Now he looked forward to finding more. Just looking ahead was becoming exciting. His old thinking had been clouded by his worries and fears. He used to think about not having enough cheese or not having it last as long as he wanted. He used to think more about what could go wrong than what could go right. But that had changed in the days since he had left Cheese Station C. He used to believe that cheese should never be moved and that change wasn't right. Now he realized it was natural for change to continually occur whether you expect it or not. Change could surprise you only if you didn't expect it and weren't looking for it. When he realized he had changed his beliefs, he paused to write on the wall, "Old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese." Haw hadn't found cheese yet, but as he ran through the maze, he thought about what he had already learned. Haw now realized that his new beliefs were encouraging new behaviors. He was behaving differently than when he kept returning to the same cheeseless station. He knew when you change what you believe, you change what you do. You can believe that a change will harm you and resist it, or you can believe that finding new cheese will help you and embrace the change. It all depends on what you choose to believe. He wrote on the wall, "When you see that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you can change course." Haw knew he would be in better shape now if he had dealt with the change much sooner and left Cheese Station C earlier. He would feel stronger in body and spirit, and he could have coped better with the challenges of finding new cheese. In fact, he probably would have found it by now if he had expected change rather than wasting time denying that the change had already taken place. He used his imagination again and saw himself finding and savoring new cheese. He decided to proceed into the more unknown parts of the maze and found little bits of cheese here and there. Haw began to regain his strength and confidence. As he thought back on where he had come from, Haw was glad he had written on the wall in many places. He trusted that it would serve as a marked trail for him to follow through the maze if he chose to leave Cheese Station C. Haw just hoped he was heading in the right direction. He thought about the possibility that Him would read the handwriting on the wall and find his way. He wrote on the wall what he had been thinking about for some time. Noticing small changes early helps you adapt to the bigger changes that are to come. By now, Haw had let go of the past and was adapting to the present. He continued on through the maze with greater strength and speed, and before long it happened. When it seemed like he had been in the maze forever, his journey, or at least this part of his journey, ended quickly and happily. Haw proceeded along a corridor that was new to him, rounded a corner and found new cheese at Cheese Station Inn. When he went inside, he was startled by what he saw. Piled high everywhere was the greatest supply of cheese he had ever seen. He didn't recognize all that he saw, as some kinds of cheese were new to him. Then he wondered for a moment whether it was real or just his imagination, until he saw his old friends Sniff and Scurry. Sniff welcomed Haw with a nod of his head, and Scurry waved his paw. Their fat little bellies showed that they had been there for some time. Haw quickly said his hellos and soon took bites of every one of his favorite cheeses. He pulled off his shoes, tied the laces together, and hung them around his neck in case he needed them again. Sniff and Scurry laughed. They nodded their heads in admiration. Then Haw jumped into the new cheese. When he had eaten his fill, he lifted a piece of fresh cheese and made a toast. Hooray for change! As Haw enjoyed the new cheese, he reflected on what he had learned. He realized that when he had been afraid to change, he had been holding on to the illusion of old cheese that was no longer there. So what was it that made him change? Was it the fear of starving to death? Haw smiled as he thought it certainly helped. Then he laughed and realized that he had started to change as soon as he had learned to laugh at himself and at what he had been doing wrong. He realized the fastest way to change is to laugh at your own folly. Then you can let go and quickly move on. He knew he had learned something useful about moving on from his mice friends, Sniff and Scurry. They kept life simple. They didn't overanalyze or overcomplicate things. When the situation changed and the cheese had been moved, they changed and moved with the cheese. He would remember that. Haw had also used his wonderful brain to do what little people do better than mice. He had envisioned himself in realistic detail, finding something better, much better. He reflected on the mistakes he had made in the past and used them to plan for his future. He knew that you could learn to deal with change. You could be more aware of the need to keep things simple, be flexible, and move quickly. You did not need to overcomplicate matters or confuse yourself with fearful beliefs. You could notice when the little changes began so that you would be better prepared for the big change that might be coming. He knew he needed to adapt faster, for if you did not adapt in time, you might as well not adapt at all. He had to admit that the biggest inhibitor to change lies within yourself, and that nothing gets better until you change. Perhaps most importantly, he realized that there is always new cheese out there, whether you recognize it at the time or not, and that you are rewarded with it when you go past your fear and enjoy the adventure. He knew that some fears should be respected, as it can keep you out of real danger, but he realized most of his fears were irrational and had kept him from changing when he needed to. He didn't like it at the time, but he knew that the change had turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as it led him to find better cheese. He had even found a better part of himself. As Haw recalled what he had learned, he thought about his friend Him. He wondered if Him had read any of the sayings Haw had written on the wall at Cheese Station C and throughout the maze. Had Him ever decided to let go and move on? Had he ever entered the maze and discovered what could make his life better? Or was Him still hemmed in because he would not change? Haw thought about going back again to Cheese Station C to see if he could find Him, assuming that Haw could find his way back there. If he found Him, he thought he might be able to show him how to get out of his predicament. But Haw realized that he had already tried to get his friend to change. Him had to find his own way, beyond his comforts and past his fears. No one else could do it for him or talk him into it. He somehow had to see the advantage of changing himself. Haw knew he had left a trail for him and that he could find his way if he could just read the handwriting on the wall. He went over and wrote down a summary of what he had learned on the largest wall of Cheese Station Inn. He drew a large piece of cheese around all the insights he had become aware of and smiled as he looked at what he had learned. The handwriting on the wall says, "Change happens. They keep moving the cheese. Anticipate change. Get ready for the cheese to move. Monitor change. Smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. Adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy new cheese. Change. Move with the cheese. Enjoy change. Savor the adventure and enjoy the taste of new cheese. Be ready to change quickly and enjoy it again and again. They keep moving the cheese. Hall realized how far he had come since he had been with him in Cheese Station C, but knew it would be easy for him to slip back if he got too comfortable. So each day he inspected Cheese Station N to see what the conditions of the cheese was. He was going to do whatever he could to avoid being surprised by unexpected change. While Hall still had a great supply of cheese, he often went out into the maze and explored new areas to stay in touch with what was happening around him. He knew it was safer to be aware of his real choices than to isolate himself in his comfort zone. Then, Hall heard what he thought was the sound of movement out in the maze. As the noise grew louder, he realized that someone was coming. Could it be him that was arriving? Was he about to turn the corner? Hall said a little prayer and hoped, as he had many times before, that maybe at last his friend was finally able to move with the cheese and enjoy it. The end. Or is it a new beginning? Thank you guys for reading with me. This is the 4th and final episode. If you enjoyed this reading series, like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know, what did you learn from the book? Also, if you would like to read the discussion later that day, let me know in the comments and I will read the rest of that book to sum everything up about the viewers and the reader's thoughts, but yeah, if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys again later. Bye.